A lot to break down about what was happening today. We've been talking about Kid Cudi's testimony, week 2 in general. But right now I want to bring on Elizabeth Milner, our long crime reporter, who is inside that courtroom for Kid Cudi's testimony. Now, one of the things I want to ask you about, Elizabeth, is we're reading the transcript, right? We're reading what he said on the stand.
Day 9 was a wild one in the criminal case against Sean Combs. The prosecution called rapper Kid Cudi to the stand, and he said Diddy was like some sort of Marvel supervillain when they finally came face to face. In just a moment, my legal experts and court insiders will break down what he and 4 other witnesses told the jury today alone, and if any of it is advancing the prosecution's racketeering case. The big bombshells?
Diddy Combs returns to court for the 9th day of testimony in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial.
Could be a big day. Rapper Kid Cudi, who once dated Diddy's ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, expected to take the stand. Good day's Briella Tomasetti outside federal court with what we can expect. Briella, what's happening?
The spotlight has never been brighter on Sean Diddy Combs, one of the most powerful names in the music industry. This trial, centering around shocking allegations of sex trafficking and racketeering, has gripped audiences worldwide. At the center of the storm is Kid Cudi, the hip-hop superstar who delivered one of the most talked-about testimonies. His calm and collected demeanor, juxtaposed with explosive details of alleged violence and intimidation, paints a gripping picture of a high-stakes legal battle. But this is only half the story. On the other side, we have passionate supporters like Dr. Umar Johnson, who vehemently defend Diddy, claiming injustice and bias at every turn. As the trial progresses, the divide between truth and loyalty grows deeper, making this more than just a courtroom drama. It's a cultural moment sparking conversations on race, power, and justice. Today, we unpack the key testimonies, defenses, and public reactions that are shaping this unprecedented trial.
A lot to break down about what was happening today. We've been talking about Kid Cudi's testimony, week 2 in general. But right now I want to bring on Elizabeth Milner, our long crime reporter, who is inside that courtroom for Kid Cudi's testimony. Now, one of the things I want to ask you about, Elizabeth, is we're reading the transcript, right? We're reading what he said on the stand. What was his tone like? Because I got to tell you, he was hitting one-liner after one-liner after one-liner. By the way, shows up in court, leather jacket, smoking a cigarette. I mean, this is Kid Cudi, major celebrity comes in. What was the substance of what he was saying? And I got to ask you the tone in which he was saying it.
Well, obviously, I didn't see the cigarette smoking part. I was inside the courtroom when this was going on, but it was a packed courtroom today, Jesse, despite it being very cold outside today, despite it even pouring down raining this morning when I came to court today. A lot of people were inside that courtroom because a lot of people wanted to know, what did Scott Mescudi, aka Kid Cudi, really have to say? So when he walks inside the courtroom, to your point, Jesse, he was very, very casual. He had on a leather jacket. It was a little bedazzled. He had on a white t-shirt. He had on jeans, something that you kind of really don't see necessarily, especially in federal court. I mean, all the other witnesses have been in suits, even some of the escort witnesses, but for Kid Cudi, he just came in very casual. He just walked right to the witness stand, didn't pay Diddy any type of attention from what I could see of him, but he got onto the witness stand and swore that oath like he normally, like all the other witnesses do, and then that's when we got into the testimony. And let me just say, Jesse, there was so much testimony. I was just writing things down and down and down again because there was really so much. And we knew about kind of the Molotov cocktail incident, especially because it was laid out in Cassie's federal lawsuit, right? But just hearing Kid Cudi explain it from his own words were just a whole nother level, I could say.
Kid Cudi's entrance alone was a statement. Dressed casually in a leather jacket and jeans, cigarette in hand, breaking the courtroom's typical formal atmosphere. But his testimony was far from casual. He recounted an intense and frightening experience where his home was invaded without his presence. Details surfaced about security cameras mysteriously being adjusted, expensive gifts left open, and even his dog locked away. All signs of a calculated intimidation effort. This testimony is crucial for the prosecution, who argues that these actions form part of a broader pattern of racketeering and violent coercion, allegedly orchestrated by Diddy and his associates. The courtroom was packed, anticipation thick, in the air, as the crowd waited to hear what Kid Cudi would reveal next.
Right, because the jury has been hearing about Scott Mescudi a lot, and they've been referring to Kid Cudi as Scott Mescudi during this. So seeing Kid Cudi in the flesh, I'm sure a lot of people wanted to know, what did he have to say about December 2011 specifically? Now, around that time frame, police actually responded to Kid Cudi's then home. He's no longer in that home anymore now, but they responded to a call about a break-in at his home. So he said that day actually started with a call from Cassie herself about 5:30, 6:30 in the morning. And Cassie relayed to Kid Cudi that Diddy had found out that the two were dating, and she sounded kind of stressed during this phone call. So what Kid Cudi did was he picked her up, he took her to a hotel called Sunset Marquis, so that way it was a little safe for her to kind of hang out there and be at that hotel. But Kid Cudi at the time said he didn't think that Cassie was even dealing with Diddy at this point.
One of the most dramatic revelations from Kid Cudi's testimony involved a Molotov cocktail attack on his Porsche, a violent and frightening act that left the luxury car completely destroyed. He detailed the aftermath, including photos of the burnt vehicle that stunned the courtroom and made the threat undeniable. Alongside this, Kid Cudi described a heated phone call with Diddy during the break-in, filled with profanity and confrontation, which revealed a tense dynamic between the two. The calmness in Diddy's response only added a chilling edge to the testimony, suggesting a man in control amidst chaos. These elements build a case that extends beyond simple allegations to a narrative of intimidation, violence, and criminal enterprise, key to the prosecution's argument. The defense team responded with vigor, aiming to dismantle Kid Cudi's testimony. They suggested the break-in might have been perpetrated by an obsessed fan rather than anyone connected to Diddy's crew. More aggressively, they sought to question Cassie Ventura's credibility, portraying her as manipulative and casting doubt on the motives behind the allegations. This defense strategy sought to shift suspicion away from Diddy and onto personal, drama, and possible misunderstandings. However, Kid Cudi's steadfastness and detailed testimony posed a significant challenge to these tactics, reinforcing the prosecution's narrative despite the defense's efforts.
Just unbelievable testimony. So as I mentioned before, it not only helps corroborate Cassandra Ventura's account, but, kidnapping, arson, these are key crimes for the racketeering statute. These are exactly what the prosecution is looking for, and you could see how Kid Cudi is filling in the pieces of that. And by the way, having Kid Cudi, a star of that, I don't know how much the jury actually knows about Kid Cudi, but having him testify, that's compelling for the prosecution. Although I will tell you, I thought it was interesting what the defense was trying to do with him under cross-examination. What were some of the highlights of cross-examination? I believe it was being conducted by Brian Steele, who, as we know, no stranger to high-profile people in the music industry. He famously represented Young Thug in his trial. What was the cross-examination about there?
Outside the courtroom, voices in support of Diddy have grown louder. Dr. Umar Johnson, a prominent activist, delivered a fiery defense on social media, condemning the court's decision to allow Cassie Ventura to testify after reportedly being paid off under a non-disclosure agreement. Dr. Umar drew parallels to the Bill Cosby trial, alleging racial double standards and an unfair legal process targeting black men in positions of power. He argued that Diddy's refusal to accept a plea deal is not just a legal tactic, but a battle to protect his legacy and empire from being dismantled.
Gotta ask you about this upcoming Diddy trial that's coming up in a few days. I think it's coming up in about 4 or 5 days. How you feel about Cassie testifying against Diddy?
Yes, sir. First of all, it should be absolutely illegal for Cassie to testify against Diddy. When he paid her off, I believe there was an NDA involved in that situation. He was paying her off to shut up and go away. After all the money he paid her, after her signing an NDA, how can she then be brought back into court to testify against him? It reminds me of Bill Cosby. Some of those women who lied on Bill Cosby during his sex abuse cases had NDAs, and the court let them break the NDA. You never see this with a white man accused of the same. You never see this with a Caucasian accused of the same. His lawyer should do all that they can to fight against Cassie testifying. She wasn't sex trafficked, so why are you testifying in a sex trafficking case? He is not being charged with crimes against Cassie. He's being charged with crimes against others. Cassie was paid and dismissed. Why is she being brought back into court after taking that man's money and testifying against him? That right there is clearly an excessive and abusive use of the law. She should not be able to take the stand against that man. And I don't condone sex abuse. I don't condone sex assault. I don't condone sex trafficking, none of that. But at the same time, I stand for justice. In letting a woman who's already been paid off and signed the NDA to come into court and testify against me like y'all allowed in the Bill Cosby trial, absolutely unacceptable, absolutely wrong. I do not like it. As far as Puffy asking for his case to be delayed, I agree with that. Remember, one of his lawyers recused himself, okay, at least one of them. So he probably has, some new people on his legal team. They got to get reacclimated and get caught up with what's going on. And I saw nothing wrong with him asking for a 2-month delay. He's already in jail. Y'all didn't give him bail, which y'all also think is a violation of his constitutional rights. So he should have got the 8-week delay. But here we go again. Deion Sanders. We want to make an example out of Puff. And of course, Deion wasn't accused of what Puffy is being accused of, but we want to make an example out of Sean Puffy Combs. He was too confident, he was too big, and it was time for us to bring him down. See, one thing we need to understand, Art, the Carmelo Anthony case, the Shador Sanders situation, the Puffy Combs case, the Shannon Sharp case. They are all involving the same basic issue. And you know what that is? Black people need to stay in their place. Shannon Sharp, you ain't got no business sleeping with 19-year-old snow bunnies. Deion and Shador, you ain't got no business being confident and independent. Sean Puffy Combs, you ain't got no business being a multi-billionaire mogul suing a multi-billionaire liquor company. Bill Cosby, you ain't have no business trying to purchase a major broadcasting station. Carmelo Anthony, you have no business defending yourself against white people. We can do whatever we want to do with your people. In every instance of all these cases, Art, there is one common theme. Black people are forgetting who the slaves are and who the slave masters are, and we're going to remind you. Our job as a people is to rebel against the slave system, Art, but you can only do that if we working together. If we organize and unify, we can overthrow the entire slaveocracy.
And how you feel about him turning down his plea deal?
I would have turned down the plea deal too, Art. I would have turned it down. And the reason I would have turned it down, and again, I don't know Puff personally, never hung around the gentleman, but I'm having a hard time believing he's guilty of sex trafficking. I don't know about the racketeering. I've never been in the bad boy office. The only thing he's being charged with that I could see him being convicted of is the prostitution. Payment for sex. That's it. The Mann Act. Interstate prostitution. That is the only thing I can see him being convicted of. I do not see the sex trafficking. I do not see the sex abuse. All I see is that there's a possibility that Sean Puffy Combs may have paid men and or women to have sex with him or other men and or women. All I see is fee for sex. Beyond fee for sex, I'm not sure of the other charges, and if my assumptions are correct, I too, like Sean Combs, would take my day in trial. I'm not pleading out.
This trial stretches far beyond a single incident, weaving a complex story involving alleged racketeering, kidnapping, and arson. Each testimony and piece of evidence adds layers to a case that could reshape the legacy of a music mogul. The legal stakes are monumental. Not only could Diddy face serious prison time, but the very foundations of his business empire and cultural influence hang in the balance.
Diddy Combs returns to court for the 9th day of testimony in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial.
Could be a big day. Rapper Kid Cudi, who once dated Diddy's ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, expected to take the stand. Good day's Briella Tomasetti outside federal court with what we can expect. Briella, what's happening?
Yeah, Tana Tashani, here's the run of show. Kid Cudi will take the stand immediately after Diddy's former personal assistant, George Kaplan, wraps up his testimony. Kaplan said that he bought drugs twice for Diddy, once in Miami and another time in Los Angeles with cash that Diddy gave him. Earlier in the day, though, we heard from psychologist Dawn Hughes, who testified as a blind expert on abusive relationships, a major component of the prosecution's case. Hughes explained that women who say they're abused often stay in relationships with their abuser, and that many victims wait months, even years, before telling someone what happened to them. Defense attorneys also cross-examined investigator Gerard Gannon, who was the special agent in charge of the raid on Diddy's home in Miami last year. Gannon told the court that his team recovered around 3 dozen bottles of baby oil, gun parts, and drugs. He said 6 people were at the home when it was searched, including a music producer and a property manager. Diddy's lawyers argue evidence in the case reflects domestic violence, but not sex trafficking.
It's a long trial, and we're just getting started. And we have a lot of witnesses to go. We have a lot of weeks to go. And as the summer gets hotter, I'm sure so will the trial.
As the trial presses on, every detail, every testimony will be dissected by lawyers, media, and the public alike. The question remains, will Sean Diddy Combs emerge unscathed, or will the courtroom dramas irrevocably alter the trajectory of one of hip-hop's most influential figures? Subscribe and stay tuned for all the latest updates in this riveting saga, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below.